Okay, this is your first physiology lecture. And with each lecture, I start the day off with a study tip. So today's study tip says, meet your neighbors, exchange contact information, and make a study date. So of course you don't have any neighbors sitting next to you right now, but we spend plenty of time in lab with your lab partners, so those are the people that you need to meet. And you may not want to make a study date. Some people like to study alone, some people like to study together. If you do make a study date, I always recommend you start off not at someone's house, but at Starbucks or the library or something like that, or someplace where you can have a snack and talk. Um, it is important though to get everyone's information at your table, just because if you leave your your binder, or someone accidentally took your homework when I passed it back and you didn't get yours, could somebody look? Or you missed class, could somebody please get you the notes? All that, those are all good reasons to meet the people at your table and get their contact information. Okay? Um, Today is chapter 1, so it's always recommended that you read the chapter before you watch the lecture. And I know that reading the chapter is really hard. The book is written at a high level, and my job is to translate the book. So you will find though that the lectures go really smoothly for you and feel really good and solidify knowledge that you may have gotten confused on in the book if you read first. So in the regular class, not the hybrid class, but in the regular class on campus, I have like 11 reading quizzes where students have to read before they hear this lecture. And I will tell you that when I am talking, looking at their eyes, there's a real connection on the days that they read. So their heads go up and down, up and down. And on the days that they don't read, they're looking up in the air and they're not understanding. And the whole time they're thinking, wow, I need to go home and look at the book because I don't know what she's talking about. Well, if you read the book before you come to class, then when you come to class, you'll be like, oh, I'm so glad I came to class. She's translating the book. So even though you're not forced to have a reading quiz before you watch this, in fact, you can watch these as many times as you want, right? It would be a good idea for you to read before you watch. I don't know if I'll convince you of that, but at least watch it again after you read. Somehow get the reading done before you watch this. So chapter 1 is about homeostasis and all the body systems. So when you took anatomy, and I know you did, it's a prerequisite for the class, you learned about several different kinds of systems. So what I want you to do is just take a minute and pause the show and write down all the systems that you can remember from anatomy. Okay, I have 11 on my notes here. So take a minute, press pause. And by the way, you don't ever have to press pause when I tell you to press pause, but it's a good idea that you do that so that you can, because in class that's how I would do it. I would stop talking for a minute. But since I'm recording, I'm not going to stop talking. Okay? So press pause and write down 11 systems. Alright, so this is what I have on my notes. I have cardiovascular. Did you say something like that? Students will say cardio or heart or blood vessels, something like that. All that is covered under cardiovascular. Next, integumentary. And tegumentary, you could write skin, that's fine. Muscular, of course, we're going to talk a lot about how muscles work. Endocrine system, hormones, spend a lot of time on that. Reproductive, male and female, that's the last chapter of the book. Nervous system, I'm sure you got that. Respiratory, your lungs. Digestive, yes. Immune system, so you might have written lymphatic, that's fine too. Skeletal system, and urinary. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think that's it. Now there are, and you could have said renal, that's fine too. So those are the basics. The one that we will not spend a lot of time on, there's not a lot of physiology involved in 2 of these. Which ones? Skeletal. Not a lot. We'll talk about, really you learn about bones and anatomy. we will talk about how we use it to store calcium and how it's used for, bone marrow, for stem cells. That we mention it, but it's not a huge, there's not a day devoted to it. The other one is skin, integumentary. That one doesn't get a lot of action either, okay? But of course, it's the largest organ in your body, and your skin is very important for detoxification and all that stuff, protecting you. So we will talk about it more when we do like the immune system. The others get a lot of information. Okay, so we start the beginning of the semester with review of the cell and Krebs cycle and glycolysis, all that stuff, and then we work into the nervous system. And I think the first part is fast. I think you're going to feel it's fast. If you've taken microbiology or anatomy recently, you won't feel that it's that fast. But if you haven't taken the prerequisites for a long time, you might feel rushed. So just get busy and start reviewing, because I know you learned all this stuff before. You just have to put it in the front of your brain again. Okay, and that just takes time. Homeostasis is the word for the day, and that is keeping the body in balance. There are two ways that we keep homeostasis in our body. One is called intrinsic control. And what's intrinsic mean? It means inside. And the opposite word is extrinsic, yes. And you can talk back to me. Of course, I can't hear you, right? But talking back is a good way for you to get involved in the class. In fact, if I was taking this class, I'd probably talk more to this lady blabbing to me on the computer than I would in real class. In real class, I'm really shy and quiet and sit in the back and don't say anything. So intrinsic control is local control, and we'll give you an example of an overworked muscle. Say you're exercising, it needs oxygen and waste removal. So how do we get, we need to increase blood flow, right, to fix this problem. And the body is not in balance. If it needs a lot of oxygen and waste removal, it's overworked. That says it's not in balance anymore. So here's how it goes. We signal nearby blood vessels. Okay, so the tissue, the muscle tissue, says it needs oxygen. That sends a signal, the waste sends a signal to the nearby blood vessels that say, please open the blood vessels wider. And we do that. That's called vasodilation. Okay, notice that the word is not dilate. Okay, it's not dilate. It's vasodilation. So it's different than a lot of people know the word dilate. Blood flow then will increase, right? If you have a bigger tube, make it wider, bigger lumen, remember the word lumen, the hole in the middle of a vessel, then you're going to increase the flow, and that extra flow will serve the purpose of bringing oxygen and removing waste. So homeostasis is achieved. Okay, so now we do the same example but with extrinsic control, and that means outside. Extrinsic control almost always involves the nervous system. Okay, so now we have the same story. Overworked muscle needs oxygen and waste removal. There are, in this case, chemoreceptors in the carotid arteries that are signaled. Okay, so now we're really far away from the muscle, right? Let's say it was your leg. Now we're way up in the carotid arteries off of the heart. And you have receptors there, the ends of neurons called receptors. You should know these words already. They are signaled and send a signal to the brain and the nervous system, which then comes back with a command to vasodilate to the entire muscle. And when you vasodilate, what happens to blood flow? Goes down or up? When you vasodilate, blood flow goes up. And then that will bring the oxygen and remove the waste so that homeostasis is achieved. So this homeostasis stuff happens all day, constantly. And it doesn't even have to be an overworked muscle. It's just you walking from class to your car, or you walking upstairs. You need more blood flow. This is how we keep the body in balance all day long. It doesn't have to be anything extreme even for it to happen. Okay, so in the example that they show of how the basics of homeostasis, they use in your book this picture of a house. Okay, it's a little house. Okay, in San Jose, that's $1 million house, right? And they talk about the temperature of the house. So let's say it's 68 degrees inside the house is what you want to set the temperature at. And this is a good temperature in the wintertime to set your house at, because you want to save money, save energy, and you don't have any money to waste on PG&E bills. Okay, so what happens then is it starts to get cold and the wind blows and gets chilly. And what happens to the temperature of the house? Yes, drops. So this, then there's a way for this to be noticed, and that is, you set the 68 in the hallway, right? There's a little device. The little device in the hallway, you set at 68, and inside there, it's reading now 65. So what device is used to measure temperature? Even if in your mouth, what device do you use to measure temperature? Right, you use a thermometer, right? So there's a thermometer to measure the temperature of the house inside that little box in the hallway. Okay, but that little box in the hallway, what's it called? The box in the hallway on the wall, that is called the thermostat. Right. So the thermostat is the the computer part. And what it does is it compares the number that you set it at, which in this picture is the green at the bottom here. This is an older one. Now they're all computerized, right? The bottom here, you can set it to say 68, and then it's comparing the actual temperature in the top, in the red there. Okay, so in this case, you've set it at 68, it got cold, and it's 65. Thermometer sees a 65, sends a signal to the thermostat. The thermostat then analyzes the problem and says, it's too cold. We want it to be 68. So who does the thermostat talk to? Talks to the heater, right? Or, everyone pretty much. In the garage, I guess, is where mine is, but might be in the house. If you live in an apartment, in a small house, it's in one of your closets in the hallway or something like that, right? So the heater then turns on, and what happens to the temperature of the house? It goes back up to 68 degrees, right? So this is an example of homeostasis pathway, where you have something good, set, normal, 68. It's called a set point. And then there's a stimulus that causes it to be changed. And then we do all this reporting of the thermometer to the thermostat to the heater, and then we fix the problem again. So homeostasis is always about bringing it back to baseline again, or back to the set point. So there are 4 parts of homeostasis. And this is just made up by some professor years ago, and now all physiology textbooks teach it this way. The first is called a stimulus, and it causes a change in the balance. The second is called a sensor, and it notices the stimulus and sends information out the afferent pathway. Okay, so do you remember that word? Afferent? Some people say afferent, that's fine. The afferent pathway in your body is a neuron or a nerve, and the afferent pathway in this story is electrical wire. Next part is the integrating center. It receives information from the sensor, establishes the set point. Okay, so that was the middle where we want the 68 degrees to be. The integrating center analyzes and then sends information out. The efferent pathway, some people say efferent, that's fine too. I always remember E for exit. And I will give you tips throughout the semester how to memorize words, because for me, afferent, efferent, I never could get straight, so now I get it straight because I remember E for exit. And you'll hear me stop and get a drink of water sometimes. Just ignore me when I swallow. Number 4, the effector is the organ that carries out the directions given by the integrating center. So we have 4 parts. What were they? Stimulus, sensor, integrating center, and effector. Okay, so let's try doing this now with the story that we just saw. What is the stimulus? What causes the change in the temperature? Right, the cold, the wind blowing. What is the stimulus sensor? What senses the change? Yes, the thermometer. What is the integrating center? The thermostat, right? By the way, thermo means, what does thermo mean? thermo means actually heat. So if it's cold, you just have less heat. So a thermo means heat. Meter, thermometer means to measure heat. And if it's cold, it's just low heat. A thermostat, notice that word. Stat is like the word homeostasis, the word stable. To keep it stable, you're keeping the heat stable. Okay, so thermostat is the integrating center. So those words actually make sense. The effector in this story, what brings the temperature back to the set point, that is the heater, the effector. So stimulus sensor, integrating center, effector. So even if something is cold, like if this was summertime and the stimulus was the sun coming down in the house, you would still have the thermometer and it would say it's getting too hot, right? And then the thermostat says, yep, hotter than what we set it at. What would be the effector? Right, the air conditioning. Yeah, which many of you don't even have and need to get. Because it's hot in this town. I'm from Sacramento. And when I came here, I was like, oh, you don't need an AC. It doesn't get that hot here. Are you kidding me? I needed an AC. I had to save up my money to buy an AC for my house when I moved here. It's hot. Okay. Especially in Evergreen, with the sun coming down in the evening. Your $1 million house that doesn't have an AC. Okay, so here's a group question. So when we're in class, I usually need to stop talking because students check out, and I need to give my voice a rest. So I always give a group question somewhere in the lecture about 25, 30 minutes into the talk. And when I give it, students talk with each other and come up with answers, and then I say, so what'd you think? And then they talk back. Now, it's a little different for you guys. I know you don't have each other. So you can still treat it like a group question where I read the question and then pause the show, and think about it, make some notes, do a little research, open your book, and try to answer the question because it will help you study for the test to have these kinds of questions. Okay? And then I will go through the answer with you. So the question is, list the stimulus, sensor, integrating center, and effector for this scenario of homeostasis. Last summer, 8-year-old Charlene was walking barefoot on the sidewalk. She stepped on a sharp piece of glass and her immediate reaction was to lift up her foot. Okay, that's homeostasis, right? She's feeling good, walking along. All of a sudden, she hits the glass and of course it hurts, so she lifts up her foot. So just in that little simple story, it's a reflex. Tell me, what is the stimulus, sensor, integrating center, and effector? Okay, pause the show. Take a minute to write down your answers. Okay, so let's go through, see what you said. Most students get the stimulus right. What's a stimulus? The glass, right. The glass she steps on. Now, we don't know that she got cut. We don't know that she's bleeding. She could be. She could have just smushed her foot with it, it somehow caused her pain. We do know that. So the sensor is something in your body that detects information from the outside world. So we have all kinds of different types of receptors. We have photoreceptors to get light, that analyze light in your eye, right? We have mechanoreceptors inside your middle ear that tell you about hearing. You have receptors in your tongue for taste. You have receptors in your skin to measure temperature, to measure pain, to measure pressure, all those things. Do you remember any of these words? Like Pacinian corpuscles, those kinds of things. That's what I'm asking you to remember detail from anatomy. And if you don't remember it, go review it. Okay? It's not impossible to remember it again. Since you spent so much time working hard in anatomy, just bring it back. Okay? So the type of sensor that notices pain, there's a technical term for it. What's it called? Starts with the letter N. It's called a nociceptor. Do you remember that word? Nociceptors in her foot notice pain. Nociceptors. From there, we have to send the signal through the afferent pathway to the integrating center. What's the integrating center? Her brain, her spinal cord. Some reflexes don't even go up to the brain, so we'll just say central nervous system. From there, there is a signal through her nerve to go to the effector. So remember, to fix the problem, she is stepping on the glass, so she needs to pick up her foot, right? So try it right now. Try picking up where you're sitting. I assume you're sitting. Why else would you not be sitting? How else would you be listening to this? Maybe on a stationary bike, right? Exercising. If you lift up your foot right now so that your foot is hanging off the ground, I'm feeling a little burn in part of my leg. So that tells me which organ is the effector, which one is doing the work of holding out my leg. And I'm feeling a burn, a couple places, but mostly right on top of my thigh. What's the name of that muscle? No, quadriceps, yeah. So the effector, to lift up the foot, the effector is the muscle. But I want you to be more specific on the test and impress me and not just say muscle, because of course, how will I know which one it is? But the quadriceps muscle is a better choice. Okay? So in this case, glass, I bet you got nociceptors harder. Even if you had said sensory receptors, that still would only be half credit on the test. Central nervous system is good. It covers brain and spinal cord. And then the effector, I need details. So I need quadriceps muscle. Okay. So let's see what's next. Negative feedback. So the major physiological response to the stimuli is to work negatively. So if you step on the glass, your body responds with negative feedback and you lift up your foot. If your body blood sugar gets too high, it will fix it by bringing it low. And so if your blood pressure goes too high, it will bring it low. If anything high, low. If it gets too low, it goes high. Maybe hormones, estrogen levels get too low, and so the body fixes it and makes it high. So they just go up and down, all around a set point. And so it always opposes the stimulus when we have negative feedback. So the body temperature is an example. It might go high and low around 37. If it gets too high, then it goes back low. And we're not talking about, fever or anything like that. We're just talking about regular day. Your blood sugar is usually around 100. After you eat, it might go up to 120. After you're not eating, it might go to 80. It fluctuates in some kind of range around the set point. And that set point is what your body's going to use for homeostasis. Your heart rate goes up and down around 70. Our first lab, you're going to be calculating your resting heart rate. And you'll see it goes up and down, all around the set point, with a high and a low of what's acceptable. Okay, so that's called negative feedback. Positive feedback is less common method of feedback, and the set point is usually ignored. So in general, that would be a really bad idea. So for like Charlene, if she steps on the glass, positive feedback would be for her to step harder on the glass and then step harder and smash her foot into it and cut up her foot really hard. So of course that is not going to be the way the body is going to have homeostasis. But there are 2 or 3 examples where the body does make something worse in order to make it reach homeostasis. So it says blood clotting. That's an example. So when there's a cut, there's a blood platelet that gets stuck, thrombocytes. Do you remember those words? They kind of spread out, and then another one stops and gets stuck. Another one gets stuck, and so like everybody's sticking together, and that's good because that makes a blood clot to stop the blood from squirting out of your finger. Okay? The other example is parturition. That's the technical term for giving birth. So when a woman is giving birth, there's a contraction, and then another contraction. And what happens to the time between the contractions? The time gets shorter, right? Faster. They happen faster and faster and faster until, and this is to, of course, push the baby out. So there are some times, and I can only think of 3 even in the book, where the body increases something in order to reach homeostasis. So negative feedback is the number 1 choice. Okay. The last slide says remaining topics of chapter 1. the rest of the book goes through tissues, organs, and systems, and I'm not going to go through it in detail here, but I do expect you to know it. So I expect you to already know the rest of the chapter, which is anatomy review, and it's all fair game for the test. And I won't ask a lot of questions from it, maybe just one or two, but I do need you to review that stuff and remember it, because I'm going to assume at the beginning of every chapter that you know the anatomy. And I will usually spend 5 minutes on the anatomy and then boom, we're on to the physiology, because that's the good part, the physiology. Okay? If you have any questions, let me know. We're done.